The sea that remembers. There is a place in the North Atlantic where the wind never stops speaking. A cluster of black rocks, lonely and cold, 30 miles west of Scotland's Outer Hebrides, the Flannan Isles. From afar, they look almost uninhabited, jagged silhouettes, broken by waves, circled by seabirds that scream into the wind. But once, at the turn of the 20th century, a light shone there, a beacon meant to stand between man and the abyss. And within a single year of its birth, that light became a legend. In December 1900, 3 men, strong, disciplined, ordinary, vanished from the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. No storm was recorded that day fierce enough to shatter iron and roll stone. No ship saw a struggle. No body was ever found. All that remained were small, human traces. A clock stopped at an unknown hour, a chair quietly pushed back, 2 coats missing from their hooks, and 1 left behind. The sea, they say, keeps its secrets, but this one, the silence of Eilean Mòr, has echoed for more than a century. Part 1. Eilean Mòr and the Parameters of Duty. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse was born of ambition and necessity. Its designer, David Allen Stevenson, came from the famed Stevenson family, engineers responsible for lighting the wild coasts of Scotland. Construction began in 1895 and finished in 1899 on Eilean Mòr, the largest of the 7 Flannan Isles. The task was almost impossible. Every brick, every rail, every ounce of cement had to be hauled up the side of the island, 45 meters of vertical cliff, slick with salt and rain. There was no pier, no shelter, no natural harbor. The sea allowed landings only when it was merciful, and mercy was rare. By the time the first lamp was lit on December 7, 1899, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse stood as a triumph over the elements. A 75-foot stone tower, its light 331 feet above sea level, reaching 20 nautical miles out to sea. It was meant to endure everything, except, perhaps, the sea itself. 3 men were assigned to guard that light. All were professionals under the Northern Lighthouse Board, NLB, men chosen for reliability, experience, and calm under pressure. James Duckett, the principal keeper, 43 years old, had served the board for over 21 years. He was known for his discipline and caution, the kind of man other keepers trusted without question. Thomas Marshall, the assistant keeper, was 28, younger, eager, and ambitious. It was said he watched Duckett's every move, learning the art of routine that kept isolation from turning into chaos. And then there was Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, aged 40. He was a temporary replacement for the station's first assistant, William Ross, who was on sick leave. MacArthur wasn't a regular lighthouse man, a relief keeper drafted for this rotation. But he was experienced, tough, and known for his quick temper and strong sense of loyalty. They arrived at Eilean Mòr, knowing that their lives would shrink to a pattern of hours. Light the lamp, record the weather, clean the glass, polish the brass, maintain the machinery, keep each other company, or keep each other sane. Isolation was the unspoken fourth keeper of every rock station. At Eilean Mòr, it was absolute. The men had no telegraph, no boat of their own, no contact with the world except for the supply ship that came once every few weeks. The Northern Lighthouse Board rules were rigid. At a 3-man station, 1 keeper must always remain inside to tend the light. No exceptions. No man was ever to be left alone outside. These were not arbitrary rules. They were survival. For the keepers, the sea was both neighbor and enemy. It could lull them with silence one moment, then turn to chaos without warning. They followed procedure with the precision of clockwork. Every entry logged, every task recorded, every decision measured against protocol. And yet, 11 months after the lighthouse opened, every one of those rules was broken. Not from negligence, but from necessity. Part 2. The scene of the absence. December 15, 26, 1900. The last normal entry in the Flannan Isles logbook was dated December 13, 1900. Routine maintenance, steady wind, nothing remarkable. The next morning, the keepers carried out their usual duties. At 9 a.m. on December 15th, the weather was recorded on a slate, a temporary note to be transferred later into the official book. That note was never copied. It was the last trace of their hands. That same night, the American steamer Archtor, en route from Philadelphia to Leith, passed near the Flannan Isles. Her captain, peering into the storm, noted in his log, "No light visible at Flannan Isles." The weather was rough, but not enough to extinguish a properly maintained beacon. Something was wrong. When the Archtor docked in Leith on December 18th, the captain reported the darkened light to the Northern Lighthouse Board. The board scheduled an immediate inspection. But nature had other plans. A violent gale trapped the relief vessel, the Hesperus, in harbor for nearly a week. Only on December 26th could she finally sail from Breescleet, Isle of Lewis, carrying Captain James Harvey and the relieving keeper, Joseph Mòr. As they neared the island, Harvey grew uneasy. No flag flew from the mast, the signal that all was well. No one waited at the landing. No smoke rose from the chimney. He sounded the ship's whistle. No answer. He fired a flare. Still silence. Mòr, grim-faced, was ordered to go ashore. The boat grounded against the slick, black rocks of the east landing. Mòr stepped out alone, gripping the handrail, climbing the steep, narrow path toward the compound. He would later tell investigators that he felt a sense of dread as he approached the tower. Not fear, exactly, but a weight, as though the island itself already knew what he was about to find. The gate was closed. The main door, closed, but unlocked. Inside, the lower entryway was silent and dry. He climbed to the living quarters. The beds were unmade. The clock on the kitchen wall had stopped. The table was clean, utensils washed and neatly placed. The oil lamp reservoir was full, the wicks trimmed, everything prepared for the night that never came. Nothing suggested panic. No sign of struggle. No overturned chair. No meal left half-eaten, as legend would later claim. It looked as though the men had calmly completed their duties, intending to return, and simply never did. Then Mòr noticed the coats. 2 sets of oilskins and sea boots were gone. The third, belonging to Donald MacArthur, still hung on its peg. He froze. Whatever had happened outside, MacArthur had left the safety of the lighthouse unprotected, something no keeper would ever do unless there was an emergency. Mòr returned to the Hesperus to report what he had seen. Captain Harvey ordered further searches around the island. Nothing. 3 men had vanished from a rock barely half a mile wide. Part 3. The evidence of force majeure. When Superintendent Robert Muirhead arrived at Eilean Mòr in early January 1901, the weather was still hostile. But the lighthouse itself stood intact, cold, silent, and immaculate. Inside, he found everything as Joseph Mòr had described. Lamps cleaned, wicks trimmed, lens polished, and oil canisters filled to the brim. The keepers had done their work with perfect discipline until the very end. The final entries confirmed it. The logbook closed on December 13th, followed by a slate with notes for December 14th and 15. The morning of the 15th had been calm enough for standard duties. No signs of chaos, no record of storm or fear. That single fact, the completion of their morning routine, proved that the disappearance happened after the 9 a.m. weather note. Sometime that afternoon, 3 men stepped outside and were never seen again. The real story was written not in ink, but in stone and iron. Muirhead and his team inspected the west landing, the exposed platform used for hauling supplies from the sea. What they saw was beyond comprehension. The iron railings that fenced the crane platform were bent and twisted out of shape. A 1-ton stone, part of the landing ES retaining wall, had been torn from its place and flung down onto the path below. Sections of turf and soil had been ripped away 200 feet above sea level, as though by a colossal hand. The rope box, normally secured in a crevice 110 feet up, was shattered, its ropes scattered like seaweed. A lifebuoy, once fastened to the railing, was missing entirely, torn free by something stronger than any human force. It was as if the ocean had climbed the cliff itself. The evidence was undeniable. Whatever had happened, it came from the sea, not from within the lighthouse. The Northern Lighthouse Board had weather records for those days. Storms had battered the region on December 12th and 13th, but by the 14th, reports described the winds as considerably calmed. That made the damage at the West Landing even harder to explain. No ordinary wave could reach that high. Not at 110 feet, certainly not at 200. And yet the wreckage proved otherwise. In the 20th century, scientists would call such events rogue waves, rare, towering walls of water that rise from nowhere, sometimes 2 or 3 times higher than surrounding seas. They travel with unimaginable energy, and when they strike rock, the result is destruction, even hundreds of feet above the tide. Moorhead's unexpectedly large roller, as he phrased it in his official report, was precisely that. A rogue wave, perhaps born from the intersection of 2 storm systems far out in the Atlantic, focused like a lens of water directly upon Eilean Mòr. It had struck the island without warning, tearing the landing apart and taking everything in its reach. Reconstructing the last moments of the keepers, Muirhead pieced together the only scenario that fit the facts. Ducat and Marshall, both wearing their heavy oilskins and boots, had gone down to the West Landing in the early afternoon to check or secure the mooring apparatus. They may have been repairing damage from the earlier storms, a broken crane, a loose box, or displaced ropes. The sea below them was deceptive, calmer than before, but still uneasy. And then, without warning, the rogue wave struck. The 2 men were swept away instantly, the force strong enough to twist iron, dislodge stone, and pull human bodies into the void below. MacArthur, seeing or hearing the disaster, rushed outside from the tower, leaving behind his coat and oilskins. In that moment, protocol meant nothing. He went to help his friends. A second surge, or the receding drag of the first, caught him too. Within seconds, the West Landing was empty. No cries, no footprints, no witnesses, only the silence of water closing over rock. It was an ending so abrupt that even the clock in the kitchen might have stopped from the shock of the wind slamming the door shut. Part 4. The Official Verdict. On January 8, 1901, Muirhead submitted his report to the Northern Lighthouse Board in Edinburgh. His conclusion was simple, logical, and deeply tragic. I am of the opinion that the men were swept away by the sea while in the discharge of their duty. He cited the missing coats, the twisted railings, the displaced stone, and the absence of any human evidence inside. The board accepted his findings. The official cause of death, entered in the district register of Carloway, read, "Probably drowned, lost in the line of duty." It was, on paper, the end of the story. But for the world beyond the board's files, the mystery was only beginning. To the public, the idea that 3 seasoned keepers could vanish so completely, without struggle, without wreckage, without remains, seemed too neat. Within weeks, alternative theories flooded the press. Some claimed there had been a fight, that MacArthur, known for a volatile temper, had quarreled with the others, and violence had broken out near the cliff edge. Others whispered of madness, isolation driving the men insane, until one killed the rest and threw himself into the sea. A few even suggested desertion, that the men had fled the island aboard a passing ship, though no vessel was ever seen. And then came the fantastical: sea monsters, foreign spies, ghosts, alien abductions, each story feeding the next, each more elaborate than the last. But none of them could account for what Muirhead had seen. Iron twisted like ribbon, turf torn at 200 feet, a 1-ton stone rolled from its foundation. No human quarrel could have caused that. No madness could move rock. The facts stood immovable as the lighthouse itself. Nature, not man, was the architect of this loss. In 1901, the term rogue wave did not exist. Sailors spoke of freak seas or rollers. Stories passed around mess tables, often dismissed as superstition. It wasn't until the late 20th century that oceanographers would confirm their reality. A rogue wave forms when multiple wave systems meet and combine, their energies stacking rather than canceling. The result is a single towering wall of water, sometimes more than 30 meters high, appearing suddenly from a calm sea and vanishing just as quickly. On that December day, such a wave may have struck Eilean Mòr at the precise moment the keepers were at their most vulnerable, bent over the landing, tying a rope, inspecting a crack. One blow from the ocean, and all 3 lives were gone. To the lighthouse service, it was a harsh but familiar truth. Many keepers had perished the same way over the decades, not by folly, but by the cruel mathematics of the sea. Part 5: Mythology, Memory, and the Echo of Fiction. Still, the world wanted poetry, not physics, and so, the Flannan Isles tragedy drifted from history into legend. In 1912, poet Wilfred Wilson Gibson published Flannan Isle. The poem told of a relief crew arriving to find untouched food, an overturned chair, and a terrible silence, deep as death. It imagined the keeper's final hours filled with terror, prayer, and divine warning. It was haunting, and entirely false. But people believed it. From that point on, fiction and fact became inseparable. Later, writers embellished the myth, invented logbooks of fear, where the men supposedly wrote of storms, unlike any seen before, and ended their notes with the phrase, "God is over all." No such entries exist. The real slate recorded nothing but barometric readings and wind directions, a final act of duty, not desperation. The story's strange silence gave it endless life. It inspired Peter Maxwell Davies' 1980 opera The Lighthouse, which turned the men's disappearance into a psychological study of guilt and faith. In the opera, the officers of the relief ship invent their own version of events, desperate to impose order on chaos. It was fiction, but it captured something true: humanity's refusal to accept that some things have no answer. Over time, the Flannan Isles have appeared in songs by Genesis, in television dramas like Doctor Who, Horror of Fang Rock, and in the 2018 film The Vanishing. Each retelling reshaped the tale, from natural disaster to ghost story to parable. The more time passed, the less the world cared about the real men, Duckett, Marshall, MacArthur, and the more it fixated on the mystery itself. In the end, the only mystery that remains is why we resist the obvious. Why we cling to the idea that there must be something more, some dark hand, some madness, some secret, when the real truth is simpler, sadder, and infinitely more human. The sea rose higher than it should have. 3 men were doing their jobs, and in the span of a few heartbeats, their world, their tower, their rules, their lives, were erased by the element they had sworn to master. The Flannan Isles lighthouse still stands. Automated since 1971, it no longer needs keepers. Its lamp turns on each night by clockwork, casting its beam over the same merciless sea. If you visit the coast of Lewis and look west on a clear night, you can see that faint white flash once every 30 seconds. It's easy to imagine 3 figures inside, men who tended the light with quiet pride, men who filled the silence with their work and their thoughts, men who trusted that steel and stone would hold. Now, only the light keeps watch. It shines across the black waves, steady, eternal, and utterly indifferent. And somewhere beneath that glow, The sea still moves, ancient and unsolved, carrying the weight of 3 names: James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur. Not a ghost story, not a crime. Just a moment when nature reminded us who truly commands the edge of the world.